When we think about energy, it's not just about keeping the lights on or powering our gadgets. It's about politics, power, and survival. Europe has found itself in the eye of a storm that's testing its unity and geopolitical strategies. With Ukraine's recent decision to halt Russian gas transit through its territory, questions arise. Has Ukraine turned its back on the European Union, or is this a calculated move to protect its sovereignty? Before we continue, please consider subscribing to the channel, as it really helps a small channel like ours go a long way. Europe has always had a complicated relationship with Russia in terms of energy supply. For decades, Russia supplied nearly 40% of Europe's gas, with pipelines crisscrossing the continent. This arrangement seemed mutually beneficial. Europe got affordable energy, and Russia pocketed billions. Since 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea, cracks began to appear in this relationship. Following the annexation, the European Union imposed sanctions on the nation, and the relationship soured as Russia began treating energy as a weapon. The full-scale war between Russia and Ukraine in 2022 made the energy tensions flare up further. Europe's dependency on Russian gas started to fade as sanctions increased and reliability diminished. However, finding an alternate gas supplier proved to be difficult, especially when such a supplier was a significant one. Fast forward to today, and Ukraine has dropped a bombshell. It will not renew the gas transit agreement that allows Russian gas to flow to Europe. The current agreement, which is set to expire, has been a lifeline for European nations like Slovakia, Austria, and Hungary. By shutting this route, Ukraine is sending a clear message. It refuses to support Russia's war machine, even indirectly. President Volodymyr Zelensky made it crystal clear. Even if other countries propose alternate solutions, like routing gas through third parties, it's still money for war. This moral stance aligns with Ukraine's struggle against Russian aggression, but it also leaves Europe scrambling for solutions. Europe's energy markets reacted instantly. Gas futures increased by as much as 5.6% in a display of panic. In this moment, try to be a policymaker in Europe. Winter is fast approaching, stocks are already under pressure, and now you have lost one of the last dependable routes for Russian gas. It's a doomsday scenario. This would force the likes of Slovakia and Hungary, which depend on liquefied natural gas, LNG, imported from the United States or Qatar, to switch to costlier options. However, LNG is not just costlier, it is also more difficult to manage. And for a continent that is already dealing with inflation and economic recession, the energy prices would be an unmitigated disaster. As if the situation was not complicated enough before, US sanctions on Gazprom Bank, the main channel through which Russian gas is to be exported, makes it even more complicated. These sanctions make it nearly impossible for European companies to pay for Russian gas without risking legal repercussions. Countries like Bulgaria have responded by threatening to block transit routes unless payment issues are resolved. It creates a chain reaction. It is not only Bulgaria that suffers. If Bulgaria ceases to pump gas through Turk Stream, those further down the pipeline, such as Serbia and Hungary, go through shortages as well. The whole region is left on the verge of an energy crisis. Europe is about to go through what is predicted to be one of its most freezing winters in living memory. Gas reserves, which are supposed to act as a buffer, are already depleting faster than expected. Low wind energy output has further strained the system, increasing reliance on gas-fired power plants. Now imagine households across Europe, from Germany to France, cranking up their heaters as temperatures plummet. Energy demand will skyrocket, and with supply already constrained, prices could hit record highs. It's a scenario that spells disaster not just for consumers, but for industries that rely heavily on affordable energy. His scenario is so dire that countries in Europe had to set aside a staggering amount of 500 billion on subsidies in order to protect both the consumers and businesses during the energy crisis as energy prices skyrocketed. This also overshadowed the financial crisis of 2008, where only 300 billion was made in bailouts. The rate at which subsidy spending increased during the crisis is alarming, as it shows how desperate the need of the hour was. The situation at Europe was such that gas prices averaged around $20 per megawatt before the energy crisis, and after it averaged around $180, marking an 800% increase in price. Although the prices dropped since then, they continue to stay on the higher end of the scale at around $50–70, which is 3 times the average. As for families, this has meant an exponential surge in the energy bills. Now, an average European spends around $1,200 to $2,000 for heating and electric energy, while earlier it cost around $800 before the crisis. This boom has left many families with reduced purchasing power, having to make ends meet using essential expenses. In countries like the UK, where energy price caps were raised multiple times, the average household energy bill hit a record $2,500 per year in 2023, forcing the government to intervene with costly subsidies. These interventions, though necessary, have placed enormous pressure on public finances, with some nations borrowing heavily to fund relief programs. Industries have fared no better, particularly energy-intensive sectors like chemicals, steel, and manufacturing, which have faced crippling operational cost increases. Germany's BASF, the world's largest chemical producer, reported a $3 billion rise in energy costs last year alone, forcing it to cut production in Europe and shift investments elsewhere. Similar struggles have been reported across the continent, with some factories shutting down or scaling back operations due to unsustainable costs. The impact on industries doesn't stop there. Higher production costs ripple through supply chains, driving inflation and reducing competitiveness on the global stage. The cost of transitioning away from Russian gas also adds up. The International Energy Agency, IEA, estimates that Europe's pivot to alternatives like liquefied natural gas, LNG, will require an additional $50 billion per year in infrastructure and import costs. Despite these investments, LNG prices are significantly higher than pipeline gas, further straining budgets. Combined with efforts to accelerate renewable energy projects, the total bill for diversifying Europe's energy sources is expected to exceed $1 trillion by 2030. Let's take a look into the issue which we always tend to overlook. Energy resources have earned political significance in the world for a long time. By banning the gas supplies from Russia, Ukraine is not just taking the high ground, it is tactically maneuvering the gas politics. It is compelling Europe to make uncomfortable decisions. Would the EU do what is necessary to assist Ukraine, such as seeking energy from elsewhere, or would it give in to the Russian pressure and try to deal with them? At the same time, Russia believes that it is impossible for Europe to do without Russian gas. By blackmailing Europe with energy needs, Moscow wants to destabilize the West's resolve over Ukraine. The situation has no simple solution and it's quite risky. In response to this crisis, Europe has been the most proactive in looking for alternative energy. There has been a huge inflow of LNG from Qatar and the US, and investments in renewable sources of energy have skyrocketed. But these measures take time. It is not as simple as pressing a button to put up the infrastructure for LNG terminals or increase wind and solar energy. Demonstrating the desperate state it finds itself in, Germany, the largest economy in Europe, has even brought coal-fired power plants back online. This comes as a surprise since the entire continent claims to be leading the charge in the green energy transition. At the same time, though, the continent is reminded of the difficult choices it has to make in the short run. This isn't something that just came up in the recent history. Taking a step back and looking at history is something crucial to understanding this. Russia's hold on energy of Europe has not been a recent development. It goes back to the years of the Cold War, when Austria started importing gas from former Soviet states. Now, decades later, Nord Stream became a strong symbol of their reliance on each other. But this relationship has always been characterized by tension. Even during the Cold War, America was warning Europe against too much dependence on Soviet energy. Fast forward to now, and those warnings seem hauntingly accurate. What are we even supposed to do? Is there a way for Europe to free itself from all this dependency and sanctions and geopolitical issues? The short answer is, not so easily. European Union is contemplating different approaches, such as creating exemptions for specific payments, or finding alternatives to using Gazprom Bank. But these are the best case stopgap measures. The proper answer, however, is to make real interventions that involve investments in the development of renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies. Europe has to put up an alternative energy structure that would not expose it to external suppliers. Will the EU stand firm in its support for Ukraine, even if it means higher costs and tougher winters? Or will economic pressures force it to compromise? Let us know in the comments section below, and make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.